Hello. Hello and welcome all in the chat. We got Peter. How'd you get in the chat and also here? How'd you do that? We got Peter. He's
I
there and he's here.
I can do anything.
You're in two places at once. Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
yes. That's my
That doesn't
talent.
make any sense.
That's my talent.
Well, we also got Nestlig, who is one of my favorite editors.
Hello.
Welcome. Let's see. In the side chat, we got Smitty and some tasty trail mix. Dapper's in there. Dapper's in way. Oh, he's in the. Yes, he is in the intro. Yes.
Yeah.
He features in the intro.
He finally made it.
We got harassed for years on end.
Yeah.
And now he's in.
And now he's in the intro. He's not coming on the channel anymore. So maybe
exactly.
we should have left him out.
Yep. No, he came on until we put him in the intro, and now he never shows up anymore. Shame. Yeah. For shame.
Speaking about showing up, I'm hoping today's not going to be as creepy as last time, because last time when we finished the show, so I recently put cameras all over the property because people tried to steal some of our shit, and so now I can see everything that is going on. And every once in a while, you catch some nice wildlife at night. And the wildlife last week, after we ended the show, was really weird because it was wearing red and white checkered pajamas. I'm not kidding.
Okay.
So I went outside, and lo and behold, it was a native species wearing pajamas, approximately 80 years old, who had escaped from a nursery home about a kilometer down the road. So I called the police, who came and got him and brought him back into captivity. But that was really weird, seeing an old guy stumble around among the trees looking, where am I?
Well, Peter, in America, our police just shoot people. So if you called the police on him here, he wouldn't have made it back to the home. He would have just gone straight to the morgue.
No.
No intermediate step.
Dutch police are much better. And so, they also called me after they picked him up and brought him back home, that he was safe at home, and thanked me for helping out, which... Yeah.
Do you ever watch John Oliver, British comedian? He lives here in New York now, or he lives over in New York now in the States?
Yes, of course, yeah.
He did a video a while back or an episode, I guess, on problems with nursing homes, and one of them was there was like a pond at this nursing home that had alligators, and I think one of the, if I remember correctly, one of the old people had gotten out of the home and fallen into this pond. So not great.
So I worked so I used to make awnings, and so every year we went and checked on the awnings of a nursery home somewhere in the center of the Netherlands, city called Wageningen. And so they had outside of the nursing home, they had a bus stop, but there wasn't a bus going there. So this was an easy way if people got out, people who were not entirely what do you say, thinking straight. They would pretty much catch them at the bus stop, because they would go there and sit and wait for the bus. So it worked.
They weren't of sound mind.
Yeah, it worked really well. So it's a good thing, and not all too disturbing to just send out someone there when you see someone on camera sitting at the bus stop, and guide them back in.
Yeah, well, glad they got home safe.
Yeah.
So, let's see. We are continuing with our favorite, the creationists we love to hate. Stephen Meyer, Michael Behe, and John Lennox, who are a philosopher, biochemist, and mathematician, respectively, and they're being interviewed on why they think Darwinism is dead, the scientific idea from the late 1800s. But
because obviously nothing else has happened since Darwin wrote his book.
Yep. Nope, nothing at all. I was actually just watching. Then the alligators called the police, and the police shot him. That's probably what happened. That's probably true, Smitty.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised. Oh, and Jamie, hello. Yeah. What was I saying? Creationists. Talking about Darwin. Oh, I was watching Dapper's a recent Dapper video in which he was responding to a talk John Sanford gave, in which Sanford is talking about all the stuff Darwin got wrong. Ooh. And he just makes so many personal attacks on Darwin. Almost makes you wonder if like Sanford feels emasculated by Darwin. I don't know.
Speaking about things going wrong, after last week's show, I had I think we had him in chat on the show that I did earlier that day. A young Earth creationist who is part of On Ra's Bible show panel, a guy called P-Town. His co-host was the guy who sent me the paper about prayer healing blindness. Remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember that. And he did a thing on it. Yeah.
Yes. So I had told him that the very first time he would go live again, I would join and then would show them PZ's rebuttal, and I would give them my own rebuttal on the paper. I don't think I mentioned it to you, but I said to a few people in the week leading up to that. First, he's going to prevent me from presenting it by really? Any means possible. If that doesn't work, he's going to try and go over the whole thing himself without listening to me first, because I was going to come back with a response. If that didn't work, he would try and prevent me from talking as long as possible until I finally would say, okay, we'll do it another time. And if I had left, he would have rambled on about how I was wrong, not even knowing what I was going to say. All of those things. Afraid. All of those things happened. I left. The guy said he couldn't do it because he had to leave. By then it was I think it was 9 p.m. his time, and so he prevented me from saying anything for 20 minutes, and then I left. And then the next day I got DMs on Twitter saying he stayed there for another 40 minutes. So by that time it was 10 p.m. for him. Just trying to rebut whatever PZ wrote. I don't get it. It's dishonesty to the max. And I had told P-Town in the live chat on my show that I was going to come over there and confront him with a rebuttal of the paper that he sent. P-Town didn't open up the stream for, I think, at least an hour, so I waited another hour. And then when I got on, his co-host said, well, yeah, I don't have time for it today.
That tracks. That tracks. I had a conversation, or I had an interaction, I guess, with a creationist yesterday that went sort of similarly. A bunch of creationists are because Dan Crenshaw, who's a Texas politician, I don't quite remember what position he's in, but Crenshaw posted on Twitter that, just saying, I'm a creationist because I don't. Or it's like, it's crazy. People say it's crazy to believe in God, but some people say that everything just got here randomly, and that's just stupid. And somebody his comments said, yeah, the odds of a strand of DNA forming randomly are like 1 in 10 to the 176th power or something like that, something insane. And I said, no, that's wrong. And then some other creationists tried jumping on that and said, here's a physicist who made that argument. And I said, I don't really care what this physicist said, but also here's why he's wrong. But the guy got so upset that I said, I don't care what the physicist says, that he like read and blocked me. So
I wonder. So we should get a mathematician to calculate the odds of a god who has existed for an eternity, and then at some point comes up with the idea of creating a world. What are the odds? If so, I don't know.
The problem with making the
one in an eternity.
DNA, yes, 1 over infinity.
Yes. 1 over infinity. Yeah, that was what I was looking for.
The problem with making that kind of calculation about DNA is one, obviously it's not random. There are going to be a set of chemical processes that are occurring, which are themselves non-random, that are, yes, Crenshaw is a representative. Thank you, Jamie. On the ball as always. To know the odds, we would have to know under what conditions DNA is forming. It's forming, it's polymerizing from these monomers, these nucleotides, and I don't know what the probability of that is, and I don't know if anyone knows what the probability of that is. So to say this is what it would, to assign some like arbitrary probability and then saying, well, this is the probability it would occur, is, like I said, it's just arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything. These calculations have no bearing on reality. So it's, it's kind of like, well, what are the odds that this mutation would spread through a gene pool? Well, we can calculate that if we know the selection coefficient, we know the generation time, or well, I guess how long it takes to get to reproductive age. We can calculate these things, right? We can know how long it would take for the mutation to spread to fixation in this population because we know how natural selection works. But it's a lot harder to do that with things that were occurring like prebiotically, because we don't know the odds that this thing would actually occur, and so we can't assign numbers to it. But whatever.
It's also
anyway.
Calculations aren't always working, and I know this because I've worked as a busboy in a diner back when I was 16 years old, and so I'll give you the thing that happened. So 3 guys came in and ordered something, and I brought them the order. And then at some point they said, we would like to pay. And I said, would you like to have everything separate, or do you want to pay everything in one bill? And they said, put it in one bill. So I went over to the cook and I said, okay, that table there wants to pay. And he quickly added it up and he said, it's $30. So I went over there with the bill and I said, it's $30. So they each gave me 10. So there were 3 of them. And so I went back to the cook and I said, okay, here's $30. And he said, I made a mistake. It was only 25. So here's 5. Go give him back the 5 euros. And I said, I thought, how am I going to give 5 euros back to 3 guys? There's no way that I can do that. So here's what I did. I took 2 euros, put them in my pocket, and gave every one of them €1 back. And then later I thought, so
that's some problem solving.
Hold on. Yeah, but so you know what happened? So each of them paid $9, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 3 times 9 is?
27.
Plus the 2 that I put in my pocket?
What's it, 29?
So where's the €1?
Well, wait.
See?
Well, didn't you say you gave them the 3 back?
They paid 30.
Yeah, and
I gave them 3
5 back, right?
I gave them 3 back.
You gave each of them Right. So you had 2, right?
I had 2.
You pocketed 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they each paid 9, which is 27, plus the 2 that I had, which is 29. They gave me 30 to begin with. So where's that
Well, they
€1?
each paid. Well, so I guess you gave them. They I guess paid. If you pocketed the 5, so 25 divided by 3, which is what, 8 1/3, right? So they each paid 8 1/3.
No. They each paid 9. 10 minus the 1. Do you see how calculations are confusing, Jackson? I mean,
I don't look. Anyways, okay. So
we could talk an hour about
this. I think we need to
move on to
the video.
Okay.
17 minutes in, and we are still getting started.
Okay. All right. Let's
leave it. Let's leave it to the chat to find that €1, and we can go to the video. How's that?
All right.
Okay.
Noam Chomsky, the great linguist.
All right, so now we begin. We approach.
It's muted.
We don't hear any sound.
Which I've been trying to hold off because
we can't hear Bob.
Actually, it's better that way. Let's continue.
I don't know what they're saying, but it's making me angry. Yeah.
we're now getting close to this notion of intelligent
There we go.
design. I want to show you 2 images. Serious question. Which image is more scientific? Which image contains more information? Which image contains more reality? Here's image 1, and there's image 2. Serious question. Which contains more information?
Pause for a moment.
They're just both diagrams.
I mean,
like the first was a doodle.
Right.
And
the first is a doodle.
And the second one was like a series attempt made by Ernst Haeckel. Although I also have problems with that one because it's like autogenic, right? It's
well, sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, literally the first one was just a doodle that Darwin made in his notebook.
Yeah.
So
it's a random thought he had, like, oh, maybe this is the case, or like what did he wrote down beneath the image?
I was like, it was something
like perhaps or something like that, like perhaps or maybe.
Well, he wrote next to it,
yeah.
I think.
Oh yeah, I think that's it. Yes, I think. Yeah. So it was not intended to be like more than that, right? So
yeah, and then the second one was an actual attempt to reconstruct the history of life, right? The first one was not. So,
but the weird thing is, the question was which contains more information.
Well, I guess the second one would have to because it's got more.
Yeah, depending on the time when it was written, right?
Well, the second one was Haeckel's tree, which he made like I think several years later after Origin of Species. It wasn't that long.
How would you calculate the difference? Let's say you had. Let's say you had the doodles from Darwin.
Let's see what they have to say about that.
I mean, this is a stupid argument. Which one contains more? It depends on when you see it.
I don't know.
There are all kinds of factors.
I guess let's see what they have to say about it, and then we can perhaps comment on that. Yeah.
I think we've been mainly offering criticism of Darwinism so far in this interview, but all of us are sympathetic to the idea that there is evidence in the natural world of the activity of a mind. John puts it one way. He talks about a top-down infusion of information into the biosphere. Mike and I talk about the concept of intelligent design. But
also
there is, I think, a powerful scientific case for intelligent design. And this was the question that
they're not answering
when
the
I
question.
went off to do my PhD.
They're
not answering the question.
But could that?
Yeah,
they're not even trying
to do with what Bob asked.
No,
it's almost like they have cut a segment out of it or something. It's like skips to a new thing. Like I don't know what happened. So.
Or it could be that Maya thinks that was a question so dumb, I'm going to answer a different question, one that I would have liked people to have asked me, Which is, by the
Probably.
way, something creationists tend to do a lot if you ask them a question.
That's true. Yeah. Hovind certainly does that.
Yes, definitely.
I don't know. What's the tactic again? Like you make it appear like you are answering a question, but you are actually not answering the question. Like it's a tactic I don't remember the name of.
I mean, you're just being kind of sly, I guess.
We could call it a
I don't know
Hovindism.
what the name.
Maybe
I don't know the name for it.
The Chewbacca defense, perhaps.
Well, the Chewbacca defense was that does not make sense. If that does not make sense, you must acquit.
Yeah, that is something else. Yeah, you're right. It's something else.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you would call that, but yeah, you're answering a different question than what's being asked. Sometimes it's valid, but they just literally didn't respond to it like at all.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Maybe somebody will. Let's see.
You watch him carefully because this is tricky material.
So I know it is.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Could
really
this mystery of the origin of information actually be a positive indicator of a different type of cause at work altogether? And the person who helped me most think this through was actually Darwin himself, because Darwin pioneered a method of historical scientific reasoning, where he realized that if you were wanting to explain an event in the remote past, you should try to explain it by causes that you see now in operation. And he got this principle from the great
pioneer that at all.
Charles Lyell. So in eastern Washington, where I live, there are little patches of white powdery stuff still on the ground from an event that happened in May of 1980. And if you don't know what caused that white powdery stuff, you'd use a standard historical method of reasoning known as the method of multiple competing hypotheses. And so you'd formulate some hypotheses. Maybe it was a flood, maybe it was an earthquake, maybe it was a volcanic eruption. Which of those explanations is best according to Darwin and Lyell's principle? Well, it's the volcanic eruption, because we have seen volcanoes produce white powdery stuff, and floods and
That's
earthquakes
how science
don't do
works.
that.
Yeah.
So if you apply this principle of reasoning, if you look for a cause now in operation, and ask yourself, well, what is the cause now in operation that produces digital information? You come to one and only one type of cause, and that's a mind.
Except it's not
Bill
digital
Gates says that DNA is like a software program, but much more complex than any we've ever created. What does it take to produce software? It takes a programmer. So what we think we're seeing with the digital information that's in DNA
is not
just a
software.
problem for Darwinian evolution, but it's a positive indicator of the activity of a mind or an intelligent agent acting in the history and the origin of life.
I'm coming to you with. I'm going to set this up with a quotation. Listen to this.
So
and then
can we pause for a moment? Then we'll get to that. So first, he just kind of explained what science is. Like he said, oh, it's called multiple competing hypotheses. Yes, that's all of science. That is literally anything you do in science. You have multiple possible hypotheses, and then you follow the one that has the most data. Like
he calls it the Lyell Darwinian method, but it's not
Baconian,
that.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
it's Baconian, right?
Yeah,
it's not. Lyell didn't come up with it. Darwin didn't come up with it. I mean, people have been using that. People have been using that for literally ever. I mean, you know, you try to explain things in terms of what you know, right?
Yeah.
People have always been doing that.
If you can propose something else that isn't known, but then you have to show that there's a there. If you want to propose something else, which they don't.
You also notice how these guys don't actually ever talk about data, like actual data. Has anyone ever seen genes being made by intelligence? No.
That's exactly.
They would
produced by.
That's a question no one asks.
Are produced by unintelligent processes. Duplications happen, and unless they want to say duplications are actually intelligent somehow, then you have an unintelligent process that is producing results that you claim are only able to be created by intelligence.
This is a question no one asks. The only one I've seen ask this question is Arn Ra with one of the guys that he talked to in his Why Do You Believe series. How does the intelligent designer design? With what? if it's a computer program, does he have a DNA machine? And how does he transfer the DNA from his computing device to a cell?
I actually asked somebody that, and they said like on the drawing board.
What?
It's
Like,
quantum
that's how they design things on the drawing board.
Quantum mechanics.
With chalk?
Quantum mechanics.
Chalk in the blackboard?
Yep, with chalk. Yeah. He just, just kind of wiggles his nose and his fingers, and then boom, there it is. It's there.
And how do you get it? How do you get it from the drawing board to a molecule, Leslie?
The actual thing. Yeah. I don't know.
Actually,
don't
Smitty makes a good point. Order doesn't appear in nature without intelligence. Regular repeating sand dunes were made by God, moving each sand grain with telepathy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Same with crystals, right? Crystals are highly ordered materials.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I tend to accidentally interrupt, but I'm not intending to.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
This is actually something that I've been also reading in the book that I mentioned last time. The what's the title again? The
Transformers or the
no, yeah, it's also a good book, but the one that I mentioned last week, Spontaneous Order and the Origins of Life.
Oh yeah.
And what they mention is that the concept of information is actually more general, and there's actually information in chemistry itself. Like how you mentioned how crystals form. Crystals, the order of crystals requires information, and that is actually present in the interactions between the specific material that is present at any given moment. Like how ice crystals form, the information for those crystals is basically present already in the interactions between the water molecules.
You mean like because like the water molecules are polar, like they have like a dipole or whatever, and all this sort of stuff, and that's the information that allows them to form these crystalline structures.
Yeah, that's actually like the concept. Like this, for example, of course they probably don't like it, but you have to like the concept of Shannon information,
right? Mm-hmm.
And it's actually very similar to the Shannon entropy. It's very similar to just entropy regarding statistical mechanics. And when ice crystals form, you actually release entropy in that sense. So it's a lot more similar than you think. The two concepts. Yeah.
Okay. That sounds cool. I did write that book down. It's in my list.
Mm-hmm.
But so are a million other books. So, You wish we'd make jokes about the creationists? I mean, I feel like we do. We made a joke about how it looks like whenever Bob here points his head forward, it looks like he's blowing out a smoke cloud. He's taking a big puff.
I'm just thinking about how the intelligent designer must hate it when he has to make it snow somewhere. Designing every snowflake separately in order to make it fall. That explains why we don't get a snow in the Netherlands a lot anymore. I mean, he's getting older, and I get it. It's too much work.
Eternity has been tough on him, Peter. You have to remember that.
Yeah. As I get older, I can appreciate that you want to just retire at some point and just don't bother anymore.
There's also a funny thing about snowflakes. Like each snowflake is unique because snowflakes, when they form, they actually record the history of their conditions. Like if a snowflake undergoes a certain path to going from like low humidity to high humidity again, and then low humidity and something like that, then the specific path that it takes determines its overall pattern eventually, the specific pattern it takes.
Well, that's kind of like with like the snow ice cycles, right? Because they record when it's like more humid some years and less humid, etc., right? And the atmospheric composition, all that sort of stuff.
Yes, so they record in a sense their history almost. So
absolutely.
It also depends. It also depends about which kind of snowflakes you talk about. If you talk about the snowflakes on Twitter, they're fairly similar. They just block you, right?
Although you can find most of them where it's pretty hot in this country. So
Mhm.
in the South.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, continue.
All right. Yeah.
To you, Bill Clinton. If you see a turtle on a fence post, you know it didn't get there by itself. All of creation, all this complex world we see around us is a turtle on
The
a
Earth
fence
is just
post.
turtles all the way down, though.
Behe looks at complicated subcellular biology and says, this couldn't have happened randomly. Meyer looks at
Also,
the fossil
again,
record and says,
the question was just completely ignored.
Right. Yeah. Oh, look, immutable destiny's here. Yeah. No, well, the turtle on the fence post thing is just, I mean, he's just saying, there's a reason for this. And of course, they're like, aha, yes, the reason is intelligent design. But again, I hate analogies. I really do. I do not like using analogies because they so often obscure the issue. That's why I hate when people refer to organelles as like nano machines and stuff.
Powerhouse of the cell.
Well, I guess I'm okay with that one, but
Yeah.
but like, oh, it's a machine. It's like, no, it's not. The way it moves is not like mechanistic, right? It's stochastic. It's moving in a certain way as a result of its chemical environment.
It biases Brownian motion into a specific direction, and it uses the chemical disequilibrium of ATP and ADP to drive this bias into one direction. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's very different from how things operate at our scale. Like things get weird when you go down, even at the molecular level. Things get weird.
Right. I mean, there's like something that you have to learn about in like high school and then again in college with like the electron transport chain. Right. It's not a mechanistic. Oh well, the protons are being pumped into the intermembrane space, and that's occurring very easily like this. It's like, no, there's a lot of this stochasticity to it involved in this process, and then as they are being shuttled back in to like the cristae by the ATP synthase and all that sort of stuff. It's not a machine, is the point. It is not a machine, and you actually sent me a paper during the discussion that Dapper and I had with Jeremy, where
Daniel Nicholson,
the paper was like, it's there's a bit of nuance that's lost when referring to them as little machines. But anyways, I guess we can get back to it.
So
sure.
one more thing. From a creationist point of view, by the way, the turtle could get there by itself because there was a flood and the turtle was floating on the water, and then the water receded, and at that moment the turtle was just above the fence post and got stuck there. So
I do have one more thing to add regarding the turtle thing. I work at an aquarium where we do have turtles, and I have seen turtles stack themselves up towards their little heat lamp on like three stacked on top of each other. Now I can understand how two got there. I've seen like one crawl on the other. I have no idea how the third one got up there. I have no naturalistic explanation for it whatsoever.
With our powers combined.
I don't get it. I've seen it happen a couple of times. I'm just like, I don't get it. There's no explanation. So I'm fine with that.
See?
Anyway, okay, we can move on.
And we have to, Neslik, you have to be sure to let him speak a little because our Bob is pretty annoyed that you interrupted him. Look, he's just on screen. Why?
Coming out of his ears.
Why? Why did you interrupt me?
I was also just reminded of a snapping turtle that climbs fences. I was just reminded of one. So.
Oh, all right.
Thanks, Jessica. All right, we can keep going.
We can move, yeah.
Too many things just appear. And John Lennox runs the maths and says,
no, he doesn't.
If there's a code, maybe there's a coder. Now,
that's not math.
One thing to observe certain limits to what Darwin and others may have been able to explain. The explanation stops here. That's as far as we can get.
Are you guys ever going to publish your data on that?
To cross that line and say, oh, I think I see what's on the other side.
You guys ever going to publish on that?
Are you in for intelligent design?
Before he answers, I would like to point out that since we have had computers, we've been adding to this code and doing more and more and more with our computer. So if you want to make that comparison, that kind of blows the idea out of the water that there's a limit to whatever change we could have in nature, because obviously with computer code it's different.
Well, also, these guys have never published a scientific paper explaining what the limit of evolution is. They talk about it a lot, and Behe has published a couple of books, and I will reiterate a point that I think was made last time by myself. To quote Jackson, Michael Behe went on Dan Stern Cardinal's show and said he doesn't know what the limit of evolution is. He said that on the show.
Mm-hmm.
He also said he doesn't take viruses and bacteria into account because of how large their population sizes are. Which again, need I remind you, he's the guy who made the bacterial flagellum argument popular back in the 90s.
Yes.
He doesn't consider bacteria anymore, I guess.
They are so passe. Bacteria are so 2001. They are so
2005 to be precise, because that was the
they had to be
Right.
precise, yeah.
that was
right after the Dover trial ended, then it became too old. Yeah.
But
Just like Matt Gates' girlfriends.
you would say that they would come up with a mechanism. Jackson.
No, we're just gonna let it slide. Keep going. Keep going, Peter.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So
Yeah.
no, none of these renowned scientists has ever come up with a mechanism that limits any change in an organism. So there has to be a mechanism that stops an organism from evolving, right?
Well, they claim that some of them do actually claim that they have the math to argue that evolutionary changes can't happen. And Meyer and I think also Behe have alluded to it in this and also the last one, which is the waiting time problem, which, as we've discussed before, and Dan did a fantastic video about it on his channel and literally talked to Michael Behe about it, and it doesn't work. And also has talked to other creationists about it and shown that it doesn't work. And also now the program that they do, the waiting time problem. No, I'm getting my stuff mixed up. Anyway, the waiting time problem doesn't work. But Dan's done some wonderful videos about it. But part of the reason it doesn't work is, well, they never apply it to actual populations. They do these calculations, which are totally theoretical, but they never actually apply them to real world organisms, right? They say, okay, well, under these parameters, humans couldn't get more than a couple, or couldn't fix more than a couple mutations, I guess. But show it with fruit flies, show it with bacteria, show it with nematodes, something that's that's easy to work with, right? That we know the reproduction and we know how the genetics works and all that sort of stuff. Show it in the lab. They never do that. They can't do that. They know they can't do it. That's why they have to write popular books about it, because they can't publish in the literature on it. So,
yeah. Another thing, Fish-Eyed Salad said, look at the smug look on Lennox's face in that frame. He has to be smug because he's the only Christian young earth creationist in this panel. So, I mean,
I think he looks like he's trying to escape.
Yeah.
Like he's just trying to pretend they're not there.
Well,
it's the game of I redefine evolution. Evolution doesn't work. Very correct. Immutable destiny.
When you look at the science behind it, when someone leans back, it's a defensive move. They want to create as much distance between you and your interlocutor as possible, and 9 out of 10 times it's a sign of getting caught. So that might explain it. Okay, continue.
Yeah. Yes.
And for answering your question about the two pictures, first of all. You asked me how much information is contained in those two pictures.
Yes, I did.
I suspect it's almost equal.
Oh, finally.
I think the question you should have asked is how much truth is contained in those two pictures. Now, To
I
come
mean, that would have
back
been a
to your
slightly less
precise
stupid question, but all
the
right.
first picture shows
I want to get back to the question you asked by telling you should have asked a different question. Well done, Lennox. that is so honest.
what people commonly call the ascent of man
Yes.
from lower animals.
Yes.
Now, here's where Darwin helped me massively by expressing in a letter a profound doubt. He said, you know, and I'm only paraphrasing because I haven't got the quote in my head. He said, you know, I'm troubled by the fact that if my explanation is correct, then how do we account for the human capacity for rational thought? He said, after all, if we started with lower animals and a monkey's mind, he said, well, is there any thinking in a monkey's mind? Now, hold that
Actually,
just
okay,
for a
pause.
moment, because I have lots.
Also,
there
that's
is.
a totally fair question. That's a totally fair question to ask. But also, I do want to point out something Darwin also said regarding the existence of the soul. Darwin said, "Read monkeys for pre-existence," as in he thought that that the concept of spirituality also existed in other primates. So he thought, and he did experiments with like primates in the zoo, showing them like snakes and stuff, and showing that they have like innate behaviors, right? And he thought, well, you have innate behaviors, and maybe you can build on those innate behaviors if you have a larger brain capacity, etc. I think that's a totally fair question. How did we get the level of intellect that we have, given that we look around the primates and we see what we have? Well, what we do know is that other primates exhibit all sorts of complex behaviors. They make tools. They many of them, most of them are highly social. So they have these groups that have social hierarchies. They,
There's also a Dutch researcher on primates who sees like the concept of justice almost. Like if you have two monkeys,
Naval, right?
if you have two monkeys and you reward one monkey with a grape and the other one monkey with a piece of cucumber, then the one who gets the cucumber gets angry because they also want the grape to get the same reward, basically. Yeah. Equal pay, people. Equal pay. Yeah.
Even the monkeys understand it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we did the orangutan's tale, and we talked about medication in apes. Apes self-medicate, not just apes. Even lemurs are known to self-medicate. They like crunch up these millipedes and rub their secretions on like rashes. What else was there? Orangutans have copied like eating certain plants that have medicinal properties from local tribes. They weren't taught this, they just observed it, and they know that when they have researchers know when these guys have like gut nematodes and stuff, they eat these leaves to help control that, right?
In India, you've got criminal gangs, monkeys that form criminal gangs with specific roles within the gang. So you have the lookouts who stand outside the shop. Then you have the ones that go into the shop and steal specific things. And then you've got other ones that distract people who follow you. So the people who have the monkeys that have the loot can get away, and they will distract the people following. So that's a very complex hierarchy attacking people. It's
Destiny, you're thinking of apes. Was it? I think it was orangutans. Actually, were the ones that chewed the leaves and then rubbed them on the. They didn't eat the leaves. They chewed the leaves and then rubbed their saliva that was infused with the compounds on their bodies. We know that chimps have cultures that they pass down, right? Like the hand clasp, the grooming hand clasp, where like two of them hold their hand and like pick insects off each other and stuff. That's a cultural phenomenon. The way that certain chimps break open like seeds and nuts and stuff is, again, it's cultural. It's in certain bands of chimpanzees, but not all of them. So they have distinct ways of doing different tasks out in the wild. And Jane Goodall became famous for that when she saw them doing that in was it Gombe, Gombe River, the bands of chimps that were over there. And so yeah, they absolutely have culture and they are intelligent. Oh, Vandalia for $9.99 says, "Here's money for therapy for having to listen to this video. I'll have to listen after work. Oh, because Drive-Thru doesn't appreciate good science debunk videos." Well, thank you very much, Vandalia. Yeah, it's probably true. I can't listen to videos at work either, so I understand. But yeah, so
Should we
I'm
also?
sure if Erica were here, she could give us much more information about primate intelligence.
Should we also, because I loved Robin Williams, should we also have an honorable mention of the gorilla Coco, with whom you can have
sign language?
Yeah, with whom you can have a much more productive conversation than with John Lennox.
Well, I actually don't agree that Coco could speak. I don't buy that actually.
You don't?
You don't think she was doing the sign language to convey her thoughts? It was all
that's pretty much debunked actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, but
and I actually believed it when I first saw it. I actually believed it, but then when I went on looking more into it, and it doesn't look very like it's not, there is no little data there, and it's I can go into it, but you can probably look up one researcher. Robert Sapolsky, I think. Is it the same guy that I also mentioned?
Oh, Behave. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, behavioral evolutionist. Yeah, he also doesn't buy it, and he can explain better than I can.
Okay, but yeah, I do know that like the way that we do language, the syntax that we have in our language is not exhibited by any other primates. So certainly it's not all a matter of. I mean, I guess it depends on whether you consider like individual like words like snake or hawk or leopard or something. Is that should that be considered like a precursor to language? Well, maybe, but it's not language that in any way that like we do, where we have syntax, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. It's quite a bit different.
Like some of the pieces may already be there, yes, but it's not whether it's a language or not. It depends on how broad you want to define language. Like it's
right.
Like if you want to define language in the same way that we speak language, then it's probably not the case. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That is definitely a thing that has evolved within the hominin lineage. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. No, I totally agree with that, because we discussed that a bit in was it the not the Handymans the Ergast tale. That's what it was. We discussed that in the Ergast tale, the evolution of, or a little bit about the evolution of language. It very quickly got over my head because linguistics is not my field, and it's very serious. It's very serious stuff. I appreciate anybody who can get into that literature, but it was not for me. So sorry.
Now I have a question. Yes. What about the research that is done on meerkats having a language, where they can actually test it and have someone come up, and then one of them in the group will say, "There's a human coming wearing a yellow shirt, wearing a blue trousers."
You can say, I think. Well, yes, they have like different words for different things. I don't know how much description organisms have, but certainly like I think even because animals can distinguish like colored shirts, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you go to a zoo and you see someone in like, because I went to the Memphis Zoo, and the gibbons saw the curator, who was not their handler, right? He doesn't interact with these animals at all, but he's the curator. And so he's wearing the maroon shirt that everybody at the zoo wears. And they came over to the glass and like sat there for a long time, trying to like get his attention, not because he's their handler, but because they recognize the color of the shirt. So obviously they can recognize him, they can distinguish between colors and whatnot. And they see, I get food when people with that color come around. So I have no doubt. Go ahead.
Sorry. Like I have a dog, and but when like every day or so, the mailman comes at the door, and in our country, the mailman always wears like an orange shirt. And now every time when I walk outside with my dog, if somebody with an orange shirt walks by, he barks at them.
Yeah,
always. An orange shirt.
Kappa's right. Yeah, communication isn't the same thing as language. Yeah, I agree, because language has syntax to it. But yeah, you can certainly describe things in your environment. There are birds like the yellow casqued hornbill, which will listen to the sounds that monkeys make. And so if one species of monkey makes the sound for eagle, for instance, this tips off the yellow casqued hornbills to fly away. But not if it makes the sound for snake. They don't respond to that. So there's this sort of interspecies communication that's going on, which I think is super cool, because monkeys do the same thing. If one of them says like leopard, the other species who are around can hear that and will know to also scatter, or something like that. So yeah. Anyway, I think we've dwelled on this long enough. So.
Yeah.
Get back to smug face.
So fun with my scientific friends. I sometimes ask them, what do you do science with? And of course they name some expensive machine. I say, no. Oh, they say, you mean and they're about to say mind when they realize that's not politically correct. And they say your brain. I said, okay, well, I believe the brain and the mind are separate, but where's your brain? Give me the brief history of the brain. I ask them, and I've done this many times. It's fascinating. And they say, well, the brain in the end is the end product of a mindless, unguided process. And I smile at them and I say, and you trust it? I say, now tell me honestly.
I was gonna let him finish, and then I'll respond to that.
Okay.
Because I have a rebuttal. I have a rebuttal for this, which I think will work.
You use every day. If you knew that it was the end product of a mindless, unguided process, would you trust it? Now, here's the thing. I have spoken with dozens of leading scientists and pushed them on this, and every single one has said no. I said, okay, so pause. Problem?
I think, first of all, to use Dapper's phrase, that's exactly. I think that's a shampoo bottle argument that he's having, to use Dapper's phrase. That didn't happen. That never happened. I don't believe. I believe he asks people if they use their mind, brain. I really don't care which one you use. I don't care. If they use their mind, or if they, are comfortable using their mind, if it resulted from evolution, and they all respond no, bullcrap. I don't believe that. So I think he's just making the story up. But also, there's a problem with this argument, because there are different degrees of intelligence in different organisms. And I think even all these guys at this table would agree with that, right? I don't know anyone who would disagree that there are differing levels of intelligence in animals, right? We all agree that, like, a dog or a horse is smarter than like a beetle, right?
I would even go so far as argue that there are different levels of intelligence in just humans.
Well, of course, but I mean, in terms of animals, right? In terms of different species, like, we all agree, like, elephants, dolphins, pigs, horses, are smarter than, like, jellyfish, sponges, beetles. We even say octopus. Octopus are intelligent invertebrates, and they're more intelligent than other mollusks, right? Like, we don't think of snails as being, or scallops as being super intelligent.
And they don't have a brain.
Well,
they do. Maybe three parts of the brain, right? Or how many brains do they have? Octopus?
Well, they
or two. They have two. I think they have 3 hearts and 2 brains, or 2 central.
Well, the point is they do have a central nervous system, right?
Yeah,
so
yes, they do.
They have like a seat of the central nervous system, which is equivalent to like the brain. But the point of what I'm saying is, by Lennox, according to Lennox, for this to be true, God would have to give differing amounts of intelligence to different organisms. And then you have to ask why. And I know he doesn't have an answer to that. None of them do. But you have to ask, why would God deposit a certain amount of intelligence in like dogs and a certain amount of intelligence in elephants? Because they're fine with saying, okay, well, maybe, elephants share common ancestry. So you can have natural selection for their brain, right? But not for ours. Is it a matter of degrees or is it types? It doesn't make any sense. I actually asked, what was her name? S.J. Thomason that one time. I said, are you implying that God just gives animals different degrees of intelligence? And honestly, funny enough, she just answered yes. She said, yep, that happens, which seems super weird and arbitrary. It's like, I mean, I guess you're consistent. I guess. Consistently dumb, but...
But so the question he asked is, if it's the end product of evolution, could you trust it? Yes, because you can have independent verification to see whether or not your sensory organs are working correctly. There's an easy way to test it, which there isn't when it comes to a God giving out intelligence.
But yeah, I mean, monkeys can tell that a fruit isn't ripe, right? That's why they don't eat it. They will avoid fruits that they recognize aren't ripe and only go for fruits that they recognize are ripe. So I guess God instills them with that, I guess. But they can also learn things. They can learn certain cultural things that they can then pass down as a group. I don't know.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird you bring this up, Jackson. It's kind of weird. So monkeys are bestowed with the knowledge about fruit, whereas Jesus couldn't figure out when a fig tree was in season.
He also thought the mustard seed was the smallest seed.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of weird thing.
And we also have to acknowledge that the brain often makes mistakes. Like I have to rely on, like I'm not capable to rely on something else. I am limited by my own physiology, of course. So but still, I have to always be wary of the potential that my brain made a mistake sometimes, because we know that the brain can make mistakes, and very often, in fact, like our memory is horrible. Notoriously horrible, like in the criminal cases, famously.
Right. Yeah. They almost want to have it both ways, don't they? They want, on the one hand, to be like, our mind is perfect, right? But also it's fallible. So it's like, if on the one hand it's perfect, therefore it has to be made. It has to have been made by God. But even if it's fallible, well, the only thing that we can certainly know is that God exists, and so God upholds the world. It's like, well, either way, I mean, because that's what it was Descartes, wasn't it, who argued that, I think, therefore I am. Well, how do you know that the world isn't, that this bit in front of you isn't like a demon trying to trick you? Well, because God is all good, and so God is actually responsible for this world. It's like, well, it's either way. It's lose, for if you don't believe. Yeah.
And one of the greatest other deceptive beliefs is that most people believe, for some reason, that their memory works like a video recorder. Like they think that the mind literally records things like a videotape does, which it doesn't. So yeah. We really overestimate our abilities in that regard, I think.
It's like you remember the last time you remembered it, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, every single time you remember something, you remember the last time you remembered it. But so the videotape analogy isn't really that bad, because if you play a videotape over and over and over again, it degrades.
Sure, I guess that's true.
The reason why you seem to remember more than you do is like the brain automatically fills in the missing details.
The blanks.
Like if you remember a person and they wore a shirt, your mind, like if your mind doesn't remember the color, it will automatically fill in the color, whatever color works. It will just fill it in automatically for you. So it probably was a green color. Or, oh no, it was red. Yeah.
And
like that. Yeah.
You can misremember stuff, which I do all the time.
And weirdly enough, some of the fallibilities of your brain stem from evolution, the pattern seeking, which is something that magicians make use of because they know what people will be looking for while doing a magic trick, and then distracting them with that while doing something else.
Oh, Immutable's right. How many minutes have we gotten through? Yeah, we should keep going. We should keep going.
Sure.
I can actually
No, please, it'll make me sad, Peter.
Oh shit, my bad. There we go. I could look at it and see how far
it's fine. It'll make me sad. Let's just keep going.
It's going to make you sad. Let's just start the video.
Let's just keep going. Yep.
Because you are giving me an argument that undermines rationality. And they turn to me and they say, where did you get that argument? I said, well, firstly, from Charles Darwin. They say, I don't believe you. And then I quote Darwin. Darwin's doubt.
This
not
was
the
his
one,
other doubt.
That's his other doubt.
That's not an argument.
Darwin's doubt about
it's just a question.
The reliability of human rationality.
Yep.
Now, this, to my mind, goes to the
doubting
heart of the implication of the whole business. And it's why I believe that there is an intelligence behind the universe.
Implication bad, therefore evolution
and
false?
Scientists are people of faith, not necessarily in God, but they believe in the rational intelligibility of the universe.
And the reliability of the mind to perceive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And therefore, what do they
base
that on? If you base that on a mindless, unguided evolutionary process, you're destroying rationality. C.S. Lewis saw that in the 1940s.
Let's pause for a moment. No, again, to go back to what we said earlier, no, you're not having blind faith in your senses. You can verify that your senses are working accurately enough by comparing what you see and smell and whatever else with other people, right? If you see a purple elephant and nobody else sees a purple elephant, then you've got something wrong going on. But if you can see that the sky is blue and everybody else, looks up, agrees the sky is blue, then you're working. Or even if you're in like a simulation or something, it doesn't matter because it's as real as it's going to be. So I'm a pragmatist about it. Sorry.
I mean, me too. Like if I for some reason like I met Morbius and I knew I was in the Matrix, but he doesn't give me any way to get out of it. I have no choice but to play by the rules of the world I'm in.
Right, exactly. Yep. Yeah, no, this argument, is argument from
It's an argument for consequence, yes.
It's exactly. Dumb. The implication is bad, therefore it's false. Nope, that's not how arguments work or ideas. If something happens to be the case and you just don't like it, that doesn't make it false. I
think this is also like a deep and fearful aversion to the idea that we are like part of nature, like animals are dumb, but I am special.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, we can keep going.
He said any theory that undermines rationality cannot be true because you're using your rationality to get to it. Alvin Plantinga has worked on it, but the most interesting person who brings it now to the fore is Thomas Nagel, the philosopher in New York. And he says there's something wrong here because if you follow evolutionary naturalism, it undermines the very rationality you need to believe, not only in evolutionary naturalism, but in any theory at all. So my major problem, Peter, in all of this,
he's
not the
Bob.
mathematics. That's just an interesting bit of evidence. It's
because
that
you don't
here
do math.
I am engaged in the rational discipline of mathematics. That all dissolves if the evolutionary naturalistic account is true. In other words, I often say to people, shooting yourself in the foot is painful, but shooting yourself in the brain is fatal.
So his argument is... pause for 1 second. So his argument is literally just an argument from consequences. Has nothing to do with how evolution works, has nothing to do with any of the evidence for evolution. He even said, don't worry about the math. It's just an argument from consequences. That's it. It's so pathetic.
It's no different essentially than Saita and Brokenkate, or how you pronounce his name. I don't know.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Say je ten Bruggenkaarten, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. It's basically like saying, if my house is on fire, I will be upset. Therefore, my house is not on fire. Like, no, your house is still on fire. Just because you don't like that doesn't mean it's not true. And that's
the argument he's making is the statement of faith on pretty much every creationist website. Any evidence that contradicts the Bible has to be discarded. He's doing the exact same thing here, but projecting it on evolution and on scientists. Because keep in mind, the argument that he made is a made-up argument where he had asked all of the scientists if they could trust their own brain. If it was, first of all, it's not the end product, because how did he get to the end product of evolution? It's still an ongoing thing, so it's not an end product.
Well, I've also had discussions with theists on Twitter who hold to this argument, because if you ask them, well, okay, is it only possible to have true beliefs if like the mind or soul exists, I guess would be the correct term, if the soul exists, even though if God put a soul in us? And from what I've seen, typically they'll say, well, no, it is not only possible to reach true beliefs if you have a soul. Then why do we need this argument? If you acknowledge that you don't have to have theistic, input from God to be able to reach true beliefs, then I don't see what the point of this argument is. And I've had a bunch of them say that, yeah, you know, organisms, because if they typically they don't believe like animals have souls, right? Typically, but elephants and monkeys and dogs can hold true beliefs about reality, and we know that they can because we can see that monkeys will pick like we said earlier, they'll only pick the fruits that are ripe. They can recognize the fruits that are unripe and they won't pick those. So they have an understanding, a true belief about the fruit ripening process and what color fruits are.
Every time I open the fridge, my dog comes to gather the cheese tags.
Right, exactly. We know that animals can have true beliefs. And so if you want to say that you have to have a soul to have a true belief, well, then you have to say that all animals have souls, right? Or at the very least, animals that that we can recognize making true or
it depends. It depends on the creationists you talk to, because I've met several creationists who will tell me that pretty much all animals have a soul too, because you have to have your dog in heaven, and if your dog doesn't have a soul, it doesn't get to heaven. So,
well, I suppose if every animal has a soul, it beats that argument, right? I mean, what can I say? Because everything has a soul. It's like the Matt Dillahunty, a watch on a beach of watches, on a planet of watches, in a universe of watches. Like, if everything is on the same level, then
according to Ian Chen asked what if you had seen his debate with Rocky Kent. Just to speak with Rocky Kent, he has one of his videos. It's been a while since I've watched those, but he says when you get to heaven, there will be new flowers with new colors, and there will be new smells and new tastes. If there are flowers in heaven, apparently flowers have a soul as well, because how the hell do they get to heaven if they don't have a soul? So everything has a soul. The argument is getting worse and worse. The watchmaker argument,
I guess.
It
All right.
Heaven sounds pretty empty if only humans there.
That's true. Very true. Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
Even though this discussion is tending to discount heavily, if not to dismiss, his theories, Darwin is emerging as a fine writer, a wise man, and in all kinds of ways an honest man. One doubt, he recognized the problem with the Cambrian record, and then he recognized this huge question of where does the mind come from? Yeah. All right, Michael, I'm quoting you to yourself. Intelligent design can happily coexist with a large degree of natural selection. Antibiotic and pesticide resistance, antifreeze proteins in fish and plants, and more may indeed be explained by the Darwinian mechanism. The critical claim of intelligent design is not that natural selection doesn't explain anything, but that it doesn't explain everything.
Okay, let's pause for a moment. Okay, so first, very interesting examples he picked. Because some of those were artificial selection. The antifreeze thing, he's tried walking that back more recently, but it kind of failed, and it was very funny to watch him fail.
Does he accept that antifreeze evolved, or
so
not?
he says? So he tried claiming that like fish antifreeze must have been the result of intelligent design. Then he got absolutely spanked on it, and then he tried. Then he came back with
He got clapped.
Yeah, well, then he came back with it doesn't really matter because all it does is just gum up the works of the ice crystal formation, which is an argument somehow saying, well, it just does this. Okay, it still evolved. That's you acknowledged it, but also, yeah, natural selection doesn't explain. Not that natural second. Not that natural second doesn't explain anything. Okay. I think that's supposed to be selection, but that doesn't explain everything. Well, yeah, of course it doesn't explain everything. It's not supposed to. Even Darwin had another mechanism of evolution, which was sexual selection. He wrote a whole book talking about how the peacock's train is not explicable on natural selection. Like, that was a book he wrote, remember?
Yeah, speaking of it, video coming out soon.
Yeah, allegedly. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was recording the other night.
No, I wasn't pushing you. Like, I was just letting everyone know that we are working on the video. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, as
as
Destiny points out, no theory in science tries to explain everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, even the theory of everything doesn't try to explain everything. It explains like the physical forces, right? But yeah, no, this is crazy. No, natural selection isn't intending to explain, to be the only a mechanism of evolution. Darwin knew this. Why Behe, writing over 100 years later, is trying to argue that it is just insane.
Like, anyway. It's something that Stan Cardinal also said to ask P. Like, when you mention Darwinian mechanisms, are we allowing other mechanisms to come in or not? Like, are we allowing drift, and are we allowing other things?
Mm-hmm.
And he says yes, but then, of course, when we go around back, and then we see only this one mechanism mentioned and nothing else.
Well, because they have to try to act more honest in front of people who they know are smarter than them. But when they're talking just to their gullible audience, they can pretend like natural selection is the only thing that exists. So
yeah.
All right,
moving on.
Yep.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Because if you posit that natural selection produced all of life, then it has to have produced not only trivia, but the profound molecular machines that are found in the cell, the genetic code, the wings of a bird, and much more. And we don't see that. And yet, it can work on DNA. For example, it can break genes. A random mutation can break a gene and, say, cause a brown bear to lose its coloration and become a white polar bear.
Right.
And eventually a new species. And it can break a
protein. But that's baby stuff by comparison with the original aims.
That's exactly right. So just like you driving down the road.
What was Darwin's book titled? On the Origin of Species?
Stones can bump up and nick your car, and you can get a scratch on it and so on. You can recognize that the car is designed, there are random nicks and bumps and so on. So random things can happen. But hold on.
Hold on, pause for a moment. Okay, but he said in the quote that Bob just read, Michael, the guy right here on screen, said antifreeze proteins in fish and plants are the result of natural selection. I don't know anyone who says that that's the result, that antifreeze proteins are the result of genes breaking.
They're just broken proteins, Jackson. They're just broken proteins.
They're broken proteins duplicating over and over and over again somehow, because breaking is duplicating. That's like some 1984 like double speak, like love is hate, that sort of stuff. Creating is destroying,
It's the same. Like it's the same thing. Like they define what they consider to be like a new thing or new information. Like and when you're asking, like, oh, if you have a duplication and then one protein does this and another one does this, and then they say, oh, there's a loss of information. But when you're asking for the opposite case, or let's hold on. One example. It's imagine one protein that does two jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then it duplicates, and then they do specific jobs, and then there's a lot of information. But then imagine them the inverse, the one doing one job, and then they do both jobs in the same protein. Mm-hmm. That's also a lot of information because you do specificity.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Dapper and I made a joke once, and then we actually did this to a creationist. We said it to them, like, you can explain every transition in the history of life as like losses, like the first tetrapods lost the ability to live completely underwater. They lost their gills, they lost their fins. You can explain all these transitions just as losses, and so yeah, I just think that's we actually did that. We brought that up to a creationist because they kept saying like, oh, in this transition, this was lost and this was lost and this was lost. And it's like, well, yeah, but you have to compare what was lost against what was gained, or at the very least what changed. So yeah, you're right. It's loss. If something's gained, it's lost. And if it's lost, it's lost. It's there's no winning. Yeah. You can't possibly win.
That's how win tells you lose, always.
Yeah.
Can I opt for one thing, Jackson, that we started GoFundMe?
Shoot. For.
So I'm just thinking about, let's say you're mommy and daddy bear living in Louisiana, getting a baby bear with a broken gene, which is now polar bear. So the polar bear has to walk all the way up to the North Pole in order to be able to mate with fellow polar bears. We should get a GoFundMe that picks up all the broken polar bears around the country in the US and ship them to the North Pole, because
yes,
I've never seen it myself, because we do have bears in Europe as well, but I have never seen a polar bear here with a broken gene, which I don't know.
Can you put Smitty's comment on screen?
Yeah.
Humans are just degraded prokaryotes. We lost the ability to reproduce asexually and live in sulfur pools. That's perfect. Yes, absolutely. Perfect, yeah. Birds lost the ability to use their fingers. Yeah, from Catholic. Yes, exactly. Whales, whales lost the ability to walk on land, right? Yeah.
This guy said this with a straight face that
he's
brown bears
to say it.
Brown bears get a gene that is broken and then become polar bears. He said that with a straight face.
Well, okay, but Peter, in Louisiana we have black bears, so they have to have a gene that breaks to make them brown, and then they have another gene that breaks to make them polar bears.
That makes for shorter travels, I guess. It's in sequence now, right?
Yes, right. There's a gradient.
There's a gradient,
actually,
and then they go from
far north.
Yeah, they go from brown bears to grizzly bears to make up for the size, and then they become white.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen polar bears. Polar bears are ludicrously large animals. However big you think a polar bear is, it's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are crazy big.
Yeah.
It looks. I saw just the paw of one when I was at the Memphis Zoo, and it really reminded me of the what is it, the Wampa from The Empire Strikes Back, the thing that attacks Luke like on Hoth and drags him back to the cave. Their paws really make you think that they're freaking huge.
Yeah.
Enormous animals.
So polar bears are like also a bit unique among the bears. Like most bears actually have almost, but not entirely, lost these sharp carnassials of the carnivorans. Like the carnivorans have like these very sharp back molars. And when bears first appeared, they became like almost vegetarian, like especially the panda bear, of course. But then when polar bears came around, they became hyper carnivorous again, and they developed these very sharp carnassials again. So yeah.
Immutable Destiny
Very sharp.
said, "Oh, so you have black bears that had the Michael Jackson operation? That would just be sad. Bears without a nose. I'd that would be so sad.
Yeah.
I just can't. I can't get over it. How did he say that with a straight face?
He's paid a lot of money to say it. If I were paid as much money as him, I'd probably say it too.
There wouldn't be any money in the world, not enough money in the world for me to say that. I mean, yeah, it would be nice to have some money, but if I had to look this stupid on video, I'd choose to be stupid on my own accord and not being paid for it. Sorry.
No, like if I had no scruples, maybe I would try to be like, pretend to be a creationist or something for the money, but like I just can't. I have too much like self-respect, and I don't care about the money.
In all fairness, you would probably make more money than Neslig and I would, because you're quite famous now as an atheist YouTuber.
Of
so if you would convert to young Earth creationism,
oh, you're right.
You would be rolling in dough.
I could have a book deal, you know. Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, let's keep going. I think we've
elegant machinery that has been discovered by science at the foundation of life, and of course the answer is
now. I'm going to quote you one more time. Listen carefully, because this one comes back to the two of you. Michael Behe continues.
He tends to do that.
Take a deep breath here. This is big. There could be, quote, a route open for a subtle God to design life without overriding natural law. If quantum events, such as radioactive decay, are not governed by causal laws, then it breaks no law of nature to influence such events. Further, although we may not be able to detect quantum manipulations, we may nevertheless be able to conclude confidently that the final structure was designed. So,
wait, hold on.
All three of you.
Hold on. He's saying, if I'm understanding that quote correctly, he's saying even if we don't have evidence of intelligent design, we can still conclude intelligent design? Did he just openly say that?
I don't know. Like, I think he's saying that it wouldn't, like a subtle behind the curtain deity.
Well, yeah, but
it does not violate natural
like a
law,
deist, a deistic sort of God, right? But
but
he said even if it doesn't technically violate this, well, yeah, sure, but you also don't have any evidence of it.
Yeah, right. This argument implies that conclusion. Yeah, it implies that there is no effect that can be observed.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to straw man him, but it does seem like he's just saying, even if we can't.
By implication, I would say. Like he doesn't say verbatim, but I would say it implies this, that it doesn't seem to be any effect that is noticeable. Yeah.
Right, but also it's completely untestable. We can't demonstrate that it was or wasn't a god at all, or whatever. So, aliens. Okay. Anyway,
there are very serious problems with Darwin. Then we go to step 2, which is if there's a code, maybe there's a coder. I see that.
You we're
on tricky territory, but all three are
the
still
banana.
There. And now Behe here goes to step 3. Actually, I think I see a mechanism
a tap on the top,
by which the coder may have operated.
I can
in
fit it
this
very easily
material
into my
world.
mouth.
Am I being fair to you?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, boys, do you go for that?
I
Steve?
don't.
You don't?
No, I think that when we invoke the action of a mind, we're invoking a non-material cause. And we don't need to play by the rules of scientific materialism to invent a mechanism to explain the origin of information, because we know from our uniform and repeated experience that information
Oh my
always
God,
arises
this
from
quote.
a mind. We don't understand the interface, the mind-body interface in the case of human intelligence. We know that we can affect the material world by the choices we make and by the thoughts that we have. I'm going to choose to move this water glass right now. But I don't know how my volitional act of my mind to initiate that act affected the material world. That interface is unknowable to us at this point. But we can infer from certain sorts of effects back to the activity of a mind. We know that a distinctive artifact or effect of intelligent activity is the production of information. Whenever we see information and we trace it back to its source, whether we're talking about computer code or a hieroglyphic inscription or a paragraph in a book or information embedded in a radio signal, we always come back to a mind.
Oh my God,
So
it's the same stupid quote.
I think we're talking across purposes here. I wasn't saying that radioactive decay is responsible for because it's a
lagging a bit.
event. The quotation that Peter read was saying, could a clever God or clever mind use something that was undetectable to scientific instrumentation to affect the results that
Literally
he
could not be tested.
wanted?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not a
now
mechanism,
he
it's a tool, rather, and it's a tool
So
wielded by a
let me-
mind.
I'm not so much disagreeing with Mike Behe. I mean, disagreeing with the requirement that many of our evolutionary colleagues want to place on the theory of intelligent design, that it formulate
It's not a
its
theory.
alternative explanation
even a
as a
hypothesis.
mechanistic cause. We're proposing a different kind of cause, a mental cause, which is something we recognize from our ordinary experience, but is somehow when we get into the science lab, we want to say, well, everything has to be explained materialistically, even information, which we know doesn't come about by undirected material processes.
Isn't it in...
Wait, hold on. Okay, so what they are admitting right now is one, they don't have a theory at all because they have no causal mechanism. They're just saying it could, it could be the case that this is the way God interacts with the world. Could be. We have no idea. As Behe just said, we don't know that this is the case. But that also means they are removing themselves from science. If you are literally proposing an untestable mechanism as your causal mechanism, you're not doing science. At the very best, we could say we don't know how this thing is happening. That's the very best we can say.
Yeah.
Which again,
and the excuse that like Stephen comes up with is like, oh, we propose a mind as the explanation, and it's not material, it's a mind, and then I would say those two are not mutually exclusive. Like the way you just moved the glass of water around, that involves both a mind and the physical body. So you would still.
Where's the interface happening? What's the interface? What can we test to show that this mental cause is in fact what's responsible for what we see in the real world? What could we test? What could we show? And it kind of seems like they're proposing, well, we can't really test anything. Then what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? You know, having these little word games like, oh, DNA is information and our radio signal is information.
Talking about shooting yourself in the foot, like Lennox was like, "Oh, you shoot yourself in the brain," but what did you do? What did you just do? You just admit.
They've just removed themselves from the scientific discussion. Okay, all right.
I'm going to play
how many more
creationist for this one because no one has noticed. I've been checking the chat. No one has noticed, and you, Jackson, haven't noticed, and nor is Nestle.
What?
What did Behe call Bob?
Peter?
Yes. Shit.
No, I heard him. I heard him say it. That's why I said, no, he's not Peter. He's Bob.
Shit.
He looks like a Bob. He doesn't look like a Peter. He's a Bob.
He doesn't look like a Peter. I refuse to call him Peter. Okay.
Nope, he's Bob.
Let's continue.
From now and forever. If I ever have an interview with this guy, I'm going to be like, that's exactly right, Bob. That's what I've been saying. And he's like, I'm sorry, what? My name is Peter.
You're like
Bob.
Wolverine. You're like Wolverine calling people Bob.
Bob, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
That's there was actually a bit on. I'm sorry, tangent. There's a bit on SpongeBob where the guy's like, "It's all closed up, Frank. My name is Phil. Whatever floats your boat, Frank." You know, it's that sort of, it's that sort of thing. Anyway, okay, we can keep going.
Here. Isn't it in the nature of science, even among, perhaps even especially among believers? Newton was I think it's fair to say he was a Christian. He was certainly he was a Christian, of course.
All the pioneers of mathematics were believers in God.
Newton understands himself to be exploring the mind of God.
Yes, that's
and at some basic level, Newton, faithful
cool.
Christian,
good for him,
is saying, how did he do it?
Yeah.
How did he do this? How did he do that? He's not saying, well, it's the mind of God, therefore no more questions to follow. He's in search of specific mechanisms, and that's a good and noble thing, which endows us with 9/10 of what we know about physics in some basic way, right? So here's the question that presents itself to me.
Well, okay,
layman
but
that I
hold on 1 second. So we're not saying. I know Peter and I don't know about Nestle, but I'm not going to ask. We're not saying that, or science isn't saying that it's trying to push atheism. It's not saying, nowhere in science does it say that God doesn't exist or that there are only metaphysically natural causes in the universe or whatever. That's not what science is saying. That's not what science has ever said, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what science is about. It's only saying we propose this cause because it's this natural cause because it's testable, right? Maybe it's possible. Maybe he's right. Maybe God, has done something.
Maybe he's behind the curtain somewhere. Where we cannot
maybe
go.
he's behind the curtain. Possible, but that's not science because we can't test it. Now, it's not to say it doesn't exist. It could certainly be the case. Who's to say? But we can't test it, so it can't be science, even if it is true, right? The same is true of miracles. If miracles do happen, they do exist, the most we can say about them from a scientific perspective is science can't explain them. Mm-hmm. We cannot conclude from scientific principles that God is the miracle worker. We can't. Because science doesn't work that way. It's a tool that we use that has a very particular methodology for understanding the world.
We could make the observation, but it would be an ongoing investigation if we can find the mechanism with how it was done. But
right.
I have a slightly more nuanced thing when it comes to science, because science follows the evidence. So every explanation science comes up with is based on the evidence that they've gathered. And funny enough, none of those lead to a God. There's all of them lead to naturalistic explanations. So science doesn't push atheism, but what it does do is it takes away things that used to be explained by a God and giving them a natural explanation. And the gap for God is becoming narrower and narrower over time. And then the humans came up with these pesky smartphones that can not only take pictures but also can record video, which probably the death knell for miracles, because everyone these days has a phone. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Although we could see
how many minutes do we have?
We could see a revival now. AI is coming up because
deep fakes.
Yeah, we can just ask AI to come up with a video that basically shows a miracle. And then at some point, it's going to be hard to distinguish whether or not it's made by an AI. Okay, you wanted to know how far we're in at the moment?
Yeah.
We started at 40 minutes and 20 seconds, and we are now on 54
I
minutes,
hope we're in the 50s.
47
Oh,
seconds. So we
okay, not bad.
almost 50.
How much more do we still have?
Half an hour.
Oh, Christ.
Oh, God.
Okay,
like
let's keep going.
But we do have a next video already, so and that's going to be a fun one too. So, but let's finish this one first.
Stand in for baffled people the world over. Science, the question in science, how does it happen? Charles Darwin says, here's how it happened. Okay, and if you guys want to say, well, Charles Darwin was wrong, then I say, okay, if it didn't happen that way, how did it happen? And the answer can't just be God, or it can't just be designer. There's some sort of human impulse in us to say, well, how? What's the mechanism? And that's
actually, this is a really good question.
I'm going to make a prediction.
He's actually asking a really good question.
None of these guys is going to answer that question. None of them.
A fair question.
No, you're probably right.
You're
probably right.
Stephen's trying to say no.
No,
Go ahead.
well, I'll come
Go
back
ahead.
at you in a
Go
minute.
ahead.
Yeah,
When Newton discovered his law of gravitation, he didn't say, now I've got a scientific explanation, I don't need God. What he did was to write Principia Mathematica, most famous book in the history of science, and expressed in it the hope that his research would lead thinking people to believe in God. In other words, he believed his science was showing evidence of an intelligent input into the universe.
Beauty, design, predictability.
Yes, but the important thing here is that a huge confusion comes up through Richard Dawkins suggesting that the God explanation is the same as the scientific explanation. That's like saying that the Henry Ford explanation for a motor car is the same as the explanation in terms of physics and automobile engineering.
Oh, he's going to do the stupid T
explanation,
analogy.
and we need both to give a full explanation.
And there are different kinds of questions, Peter. The question of how the internal combustion engine operates can be answered using principles of mechanical and electrical engineering. But the question of the origin of the car can't be answered apart from invoking the activity of an intelligence. In the Principia, Newton he described the ongoing regular process of gravity, and he used a mathematical law to describe that process. But he also believed that the fine-tuning of the solar system gave direct evidence of the activity of a designing intelligence. He said this most beautiful system of sun, planet, and comets could...
And
so what?
We still don't have a mechanism.
We don't need... That's right, we don't have a mechanism. Now, on the one hand, they're saying it answers two different questions, right? Because I've heard Lennox's analogy, or I think it's Lennox, it might be somebody else, who says, why is the tea hot, right? And they say, oh, it's because, and they say, well, you can answer in terms of like mechanistically, because it's, the molecules are, in an excited state, whatever, and it's causing steam, blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, oh, well, because I wanted hot tea. That saying you wanted hot tea is not an answer to the question of what is the reason that the tea itself is hot, right? What is the reason? What is the physical reason? It's an answer to a different question, right? You're asking how did the tea become hot? You're not asking why the tea itself is hot. You're asking how did it come to be that way? And again, there's a mechanistic explanation for that, or a natural explanation for that. And the explanation is you decided that you wanted tea, so you heated up this water, right? When they say things like, well, we have this naturalistic explanation for how, bodies interact with each other. And that's, what Newton explained. But Newton had to invoke God to explain, well, how'd the planets get there in the first place? Well, we don't need that anymore because we know how the planets got there in the first place, right? We understand.
Also, Newton couldn't figure out how to work out a three-body system, and so he didn't believe that the planets could be stable. So he thought, that's where God comes in to stabilize the orbits of the planet. But then someone else came later, and they figured out the math, and they say like, oh yeah, the planet can be stable. But the orbits can be stable over time. Yeah. So it's
Yeah. We didn't need to use God
Newton
as the explanation.
Yeah, Newton was smart, but he did make mistakes in that regard.
And as a true petrol head, I have to add, Hicket called it as well, the origin of the car. Henry Ford wasn't the explanation. Actually, that was a guy called Benz from Germany. He invented the automobile. Henry Ford just copied it.
Well, even still, the point that they're trying to make is, there are different ways of answering the question of how did the car get designed. Although even still in that case, it's the answer is that people built it, right? Or I guess I forgot what their original question about the car thing was, but but even still,
it was that you had different explanations. That you had different explanations to come to the internal combustion engine. I think that was the initial argument.
But even still, Lennox said that Dawkins confuses what the purpose of God is. But then he also says God is the explanation. Because on the one hand, it seems like he's saying Dawkins confused God as an explanation, but he's also saying God is an explanation, and they're saying, well, it's different ways of doing it. Well, you believe both of these are true. And
yes,
there was a physical way that both of these explanations are true, right? If it is in fact the case that God set all the planets in our solar system in their particular orbits and whatnot, then again, shouldn't we have some way to demonstrate that? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like the best explanation for how our planets got where they are is there was, this nebula that condensed, and that's what resulted in our sun, in the same way that we see that happening across, the universe. And that's where our sun and all of our planets and whatnot came from. That's a mechanistic explanation or a natural explanation that doesn't involve a deity, doesn't involve supernatural anything. So
I think what Lennox just did was just pure dishonest, because I could be mistaken, and if I'm mistaken, people can correct me. What I think that Dawkins did is he steelmanned the position of the creationist, putting forward a God as an explanation as opposed to naturalistic explanations. I'm not entirely sure,
no,
but
I think you're right.
I think that was what happened, and then look at both explanations and then see whether or not they hold water.
Right, because at the end of the day, science is not about like truth with a capital T, right? It's about predictability. So if the Book of Green Gnomes has a higher predictive power than science does, then you're going to go with the Book of Green Gnomes. You're not going to go with science.
Exactly.
Because it has less predictive power. And that's ultimately what science is about. It's not about finding the truth. It's about determining how the world works, yes, finding truths, lowercase t, but also having predictability, being able to find oil, being able to figure out that if you put these chemicals together, it will result in this reaction, which we can market, etc. That's what companies care about, and they use science to that end, right? Because if it's not making money for them, they're not going to do it. That's literally their only incentive. It's just money. And if the science doesn't bring in the money, if the Book of Green Gnomes does, it brings in money better than science, they're going to go with the Book of Green Gnomes. That's how that works.
And the fun thing in science is when you get new evidence, you change your position. So Brian Stevens just put in, Ben's got the idea from Dutch physicist called Christian Huygens. So I'm going to look up Christian Huygens to see whether or not he was at the basis of the automobile, because that would make me kind of proud, I think.
Well, while you're doing that, let's go forward.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do that after the show. Obviously, I'm not going to do that right now.
I gotcha.
Only be the product of an intelligent and powerful being. So he actually made a direct design argument. When we're talking about the origin of life, or the origin of the universe, or the origin of the Cambrian animals, there's another way of framing the question. It is, what type of cause best explains the origin of these things? An undirected material process or an intelligent cause? And science...
Yeah, but why do you object to Michael's attempt to find a mechanism?
Yes,
let me just
Michael.
Let Michael come in.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel as though I've set things up so that the two of you have been able to beat him about the head and shoulders.
When Isaac Newton developed his wonderful law of gravity, he was asked, what the heck is gravity? And he said, hypothesis non fingo.
Yes.
I feigned no hypothesis.
He had no mechanism.
He didn't have a mechanism. What's the mechanism for the Big Bang?
Nobody
knows. What's the mechanism for radioactive decay? I don't know. So there's lots of things that happen.
Let me ask, what's the mechanism for an intelligent designer creating?
Also,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, like I'm not a physics guy, but if I'm not mistaken, radioactive decay happens via the weak nuclear force. So.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yes, but which? Why is it like you can't predict which particular atoms, like in a sample, will undergo decay to produce, daughter products? I mean, yeah, you're right. It is a stable nuclear force doing things like alpha and beta decay and whatnot, but you can't predict which ones will do that.
Yeah, it's not like we know it's a pretty much random chance event with 50% in the
I think that's what he's referring to. Not like he's not saying like literally like we don't know how they undergo decay. I think he's saying we don't know like which ones will, or for under what circumstances do that or whatever. So.
Yeah.
But what drives me mad is that the evolutionists have to come up with all the mechanisms in order to make it believable. They haven't come up with a single mechanism on how a deity or an intelligent designer or a god could create anything. And they haven't even tried to come up with something. Because they can't. Yeah. They know they can't. It's the double standard that you always will see with people like this. Continue?
Yeah. True. Yep.
And true. People don't know what the mechanism is, but we see patterns and we can deduce explanations from the patterns.
Okay. I'm going to quote you, and I begin by quoting someone you quote. This is more Behe here. Biochemist Franklin Harold, in his 2001 book, The Way of the Cell, quote, "We should reject as a matter of principle the substitution of intelligent design for the dialogue of chance and necessity, but we must concede that there are presently no detailed accounts of the evolution of any biochemical system, only a variety of wishful explanations," close quote. And Michael says, well, to begin with, that's quite a breathtaking concession, and congratulations, the science has moved along enough to recognize the limits to Darwin.
Well, so for one thing, we do actually have molecular explanations for a lot of things. Dan likes to give the example of the HIV, the gene that gives HIV resistance. What is it? The
VPU.
What is it? Oh, it's
the VPU protein.
Yeah, what's the gene for it?
Tetherin. You mean the human protein that it's attached to?
Yeah, but well, at any rate, yeah. So that occurred on a human timescale, right? Like within, or that I think wasn't it that like it was caused by a mutation, or one of the mutations that set it up was like people who had a
oh, you mean human resistance? You mean human resistance against HIV? Or that's the CCR delta 32 mutation.
That's what it was. Yeah, but like one of the mutations involved in that was a result or came from people who survived like the Black Death, right, in Europe. And so
I think it's one. I think it's one hypothesis, but I don't know if it's the correct idea. But
well, at any rate, the point is either way, even if it's wrong, we have a mutation or a set of mutations which didn't exist prior, right? And now they do exist, and we understand like we understand pretty well how it got there, what it does. We know it was through natural mechanisms, right? It wasn't God. And actually, Dan and Behe talked about that also. Behe was like, "Oh, I don't really care about that. That seems fine with me." So it's like they allow certain things, but they get mad when like you propose an explanation for something that like all organisms have. So there are pretty good explanations for how like ATP synthase evolved, like what the components were that came together, and the steps that were involved in that process. And they get real mad, like, "Oh, well, you're just speculating." Well, it's like, well, you want us to have an explanation, but obviously we can't just watch it evolve because it's in everything. All organisms have it. and then when we do give you explanations for it, you just dismiss them out of hand. So it's another instance of heads I win, tails you lose. So,
and what do you have? Well, nothing.
Well, it was God. God did. Yep. We can keep going.
And then Michael continues. Harold never spells out his reasoning, that is to say, why we should reject intelligent design in principle, but I think the principle probably boils down to this. Design appears to point strongly beyond nature. All three of us are down for, everybody's down for that. It has philosophical and theological implications because some think that science should avoid a theory that points so strongly beyond nature they want to rule out intelligent design from the start, close quote. This is the question of drawing lines. And I pose the question to Michael Behe, what the heck is wrong with that? We just say, science goes as far as it goes with our 5 senses and what we can reason therefrom. And when it hits a dead end, it says, dead end. You haven't got it. Radioactive decay, gravity, don't know. Go ahead. So what's wrong with drawing these very sharp lines? Why do you want to include intelligent design in the scientific enterprise?
Well, for a couple reasons. First, if scientists claimed that they did not know how life developed, that would be good with me. That would be a step in the right direction, because they don't. Unfortunately, people pretend
they
that
do say that.
On the other hand,
you're just lying.
Can tell, we conclude design, we infer design from physical evidence. It's not from some, vision or anything that people have. If you look at a mousetrap, you can tell it was designed, and you can tell because you see how the parts are arranged, what the relationship of the parts with respect to each other.
Because things that are made of metal and wood don't reproduce.
An outboard motor on a boat, you see the same thing. You see a purposeful arrangement of parts.
Metal doesn't reproduce.
Now we see that in the machinery of the cell. We see outboard motors in the cell. We see trucks.
I mean, Jackson, you know that Kent Hovind has debunked that idea, because obviously lug nuts from a Pontiac fit on a Chevrolet, therefore they have a common ancestor. So I still have 2 Fords, and I'm still waiting for them to reproduce, but so far nothing. Maybe they're too old.
This is almost, I don't know. It almost seems like you could use this argument to say, like, well, I don't think random natural forces produced a sequoia. It must have been intelligently designed. It's too complex to have just appeared. Like,
the weird thing is when they come up with a comparison.
What about the Giant's Causeway? Do you know about that, Jackson? The Giant's Causeway in I think it's in Scotland.
No, tell me, what is it?
It's if you look up the Giant's Causeway, it's like this structure made of basalt, and it's like organized into vertical hexagon columns. Because when basalt solidifies, it fractures into these
I know what you're
angles. Yeah, in these angles, and people actually believed that this was made by giants because it was this specific structure.
Yes,
that's why it's called the Giant's Causeway. Yeah,
that is really cool. I know what you're talking about. Also, I want to thank.
It's in Ireland. Sorry, Irish. It's in Ireland.
Savage Cobra, kinda official, for $5. If Behe had self-respect, he would not be using the mousetrap analogy post Kitzmiller v. Dover. Thank you. Yeah, very true. But he's not honest. I'm sorry, I can't help it. This guy in the side chat, we have a creationist here. who says the protein folding problem alone proves that mutation selection are insufficient to account for the complexity of life. There is no mutation selection, or sorry, there's no protein folding problem. That does not, that's not a thing, right? That is just not a thing. There are lots of different ways to produce the same sorts of folds through mutations. There are lots of different mutations that produce like no folding changes at all. There are lots of proteins are typically very robust to mutations, and just that's not a thing. It really isn't a thing. It's kind of silly because you just have to ask, like, take any example of an allele which has gone to fixation in a population that caused a folding change. That was a natural process, and we can pick lots and lots of examples, right? We can pick the example of what is it? We did one with the garter snake. So the garter snake, Thamnophis, which is in North America, or I know some of the species live in North America. Maybe they live in South America too. But regardless, several species underwent mutations which caused their protein, their sodium channel enzymes to fold slightly differently, and this prevented them from being from dying as a result of tetrodotoxin in newts that live in their environment. So when you say there is a protein folding problem, you are just wrong. That's not a thing that exists. Okay?
That's pretty weird.
And I want to add one more thing. Hold on, Neslik. I want to add one more thing because the same creationist said, stop confusing creationism with intelligent design, by the way. After the Kitzmiller versus Dover case, I don't think we have to anymore.
I see design proponents.
Exactly.
It's just like I was just want to mention that like when I heard the protein folding problem, I'm hearing the old issue of how like you have many different possible conformations of how a protein can take place. So how does a protein get to a specific configuration so quickly? And that issue has already been solved. Like we know that now it goes into like a molten globule state, and before it becomes an appropriate fold protein. So it's an issue that we already know about. So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite experiments involved these researchers who took a recombinase in E. coli, and they evolved it to be able to remove an HIV sequence from the E. coli's DNA. So originally the recombinase could not recognize the HIV sequence. There's about a 50% similarity between the HIV sequence and the sequence of DNA that the recombinase removes from the E. coli's genome. So they evolved these E. coli, they put this HIV DNA in them and got them over a number of generations to get progressively better at removing that sequence, the HIV sequence. So the protein or the gene for the recombinase enzyme underwent mutations that gradually changed the sequence it recognized until it was able to remove the HIV sequence. So that involved changes in the protein folding. And it still worked. It worked at every step along the way because they selected for the populations who got progressively better at removing that sequence. So again, this whole protein folding problem is not a real thing. It is something creationists are perpetuating.
And can I add to that?
It's a different. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, can I add to that, Tyrrell Wallach? The moment you start addressing any of us as a moron, you have already lost the argument, and you're not even worth replying to. Just saying.
Well, he says, the Dover trial was didn't solve anything. It solved that the creationists were that the intelligent design proponents were pretending to not be creationists. It solved that problem real quickly.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we're at the
Dover trial was not about whether something was scientific or not. It was about whether the intelligent design was motivated by religion or not, and it clearly was. That's
Yeah,
what the
it
conclusion was.
definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Anyway, we're at the 2-hour mark now. So we're you guys have anything coming up before you hop off?
No, I don't have anything to say.
I'm still waiting. So we have a good guest planned. Professor Flynn has asked another professor from a university in Canada who is a Christian and wants to come on our channel and talk about why she believes, which is something that I'm really looking forward to. And other than that, I think this weekend we're going to start up again on Ross' channel, doing the Blasphemer's Bible on Saturday and the Book of Mormon on Sunday. So if you don't have a church to go to, you could read some books with us.
Very true. I do want to point out also before we hop off, Tyrrell, if you want to come on and discuss this subject with me, happy to have you on. Would love to have you come on, maybe for the next week's show. We'd love to have you. On this channel though, at some point I'm going to finish The Peacock's Tale and get that out. It's a long video though, so it's going to take a little while. So all right. Well, on that note,
I'm just going to put in, as I do for Arn as well, Tyrrell can email me, and then we can set it up so he can come on your channel. So email's right there, info@gonnagoforit.com, and I'll be more than happy to set that up for you. Oh, and one thing I almost forgot, also this Sunday, if you've got a lot of time on your hands, we're doing another thing on Discord where people can convince us whether or not a God exists. Usually we're there for about 6 hours. So far, none of the people who we've had on there has been able to convince us. But if you're on Discord, drop by on the Politics Discord server this Sunday. And if you want to know more about that,
he said splendid.
When you want to know more about that particular show, you can go to the theisthelpline.com, and that's where you can get all the information about the show.
Can we do like a next week instead of a stream? We can do this instead or something maybe.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Also, ask him to pick a specific topic. I think it will be much better if you focus on one specific issue this weekend.
That's true. Peter, maybe we can hammer that out with him. But at any rate, all right. So we're going to hop off for tonight. Thank you, everybody in the live chat for watching. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Peter and Nestle, for coming. Also, always appreciate your you joining me on this. So good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.